Thanks for coming. This is the 9th annual Uptime Institute Symposium, and I couldn't be prouder and happier to have all of you here. We have guests from 32 countries this year, a record, and I really want to thank everyone for the effort that they took to get here today and to participate this week. I can guarantee you're going to love the sessions this week. We've just got some great presentations, not to mention the one that's going to start in the next 30 seconds. No, seriously, we have just some excellent presenters from companies like Telefonica, Netflix, Kaiser Permanente, and that's just today. Great in-depth operations, design, and management sessions for the data center professional, which is the theme of this year's event. So this afternoon, this opening session, what we wanted to do was set the stage for the rest of the week to provide the survey data that we've been collecting for 4 years now, to have kind of a common language and some data points to talk about for the rest of the week. So I wanted to share that with you first to kind of kick off. So the survey demographics, we send out an email every spring to our base and ask a series of questions, and people respond. You can see this year we had around 1,000 respondents, which is about our typical sample size. And the big news for us this year was we got below 50% from the US and Canada. So we're globalizing the survey data. We are trying to get a more global perspective on what's going on in the data center industry. The folks who participate in this survey, they are largely data center facilities managers. You can see 56%, with a growing percentage of IT managers and a smaller but significant percentage of VPs, C-level execs who participate in this survey every year. Also, from a vertical industry standpoint, it's about a 50-50 split between third-party providers and enterprise data center operators. So when we define that in this survey, for the third party, we're talking about colocation providers, technology service providers, kind of the whole spectrum of services that are offered there. And then the enterprise is typically your financial organizations, transportation, retail, those kinds of areas. We did one further distinction this year. Kind of a happy accident, actually, on how this came together, was we separated out the financial services organizations. One, because there's a lot of them, and two, that's just how one of the people we were working with on the data, how it got cut. And one of the things we really noticed is the financial services companies are starting to look a lot more like the colocation companies than maybe their cohorts in the other enterprise. So a lot of the data points we're going to provide are going to show that the financial services organizations and the colocation providers have a bit more maturity in their operations and how they go about procuring services and tracking their performance across their data center portfolio. They treat the data center more like a business than a lot of the other enterprise. You can kind of see from this photo, we've got the guy here with the wires all over the place. So that data point is going to come up throughout the course of the survey. So data center budgets. This is kind of where we like to start asking the question. Budgets are up, but they're not up for everybody. You can see the top line when we kind of broke it down. The colocation providers, the folks in the third-party space, are seeing massive budget increases. This is similar to what we saw last year. A lot of money is going into the third-party data center market. But on the enterprise side, you see that 50% have stagnant or shrinking budgets. So what we found, and this is similar to the trend we looked at last year, was that a lot more money is being spent in that third party, and a lot of workloads are going to the third party. And just to look at it by region briefly, you can see here, this isn't a big surprise, emerging economies, Africa, the Middle East, Latin America, Asia growing faster than some of the more established data center markets. And one of the other things we looked at was by job role, and you can ask, the senior execs have more money to spend in the data center. The IT managers, though, are having less budget. The folks that are out buying the servers, procuring the hardware, they have less money to spend. So we need to be watching that trend for the next 6 to 12 months and how that's going to play out for the facility side. So while we're talking about budgets, one of the things that, is a big line item on the budget is energy cost, obviously for a lot of data centers. And we ask, does your management team receive the energy cost? And you can see, yes, the majority, yes, we track energy cost. 75% of execs say, yes, we're tracking this. It's less so in IT. One of the questions that we've asked year over year is, who pays for the data center power bill? Is it IT or facilities? It's almost always facilities teams. The IT team is not as focused on that cost. And that's pretty consistent what we've seen year over year. And we ask, but is your management team setting targets to improve, data center energy costs? How are you trying to improve that? And you see it's not really happening. Half the people. And you can see down by job function, 38%. It's not a priority for the IT teams as it is for the execs. And you can also see by vertical, the financial market, the financial services folks operating these data centers, this is a bigger priority. But for all the other enterprises, just the data center power bill is just a part of doing business. It's something they're willing to eat and take a bath on. They're not out to improve it. So we ask, well, do you measure PUE? What are you doing with PUE? Yes. Lots of people measuring PUE, 72%. One of the things that jumped out at me when we looked at this data initially was 82% of execs, more than even the facilities managers, are tracking and monitoring their PUE. We were a little concerned with that. This is an engineering metric, and a lot of execs are using it as a management tool and tracking it. Interesting. So we said, well, what's your target PUE for your primary site? What are you trying to get to with this, efforts in PUE? You can see nearly half want to have between 1.2 and 1.5 PUE. I haven't been to a lot of sites that are actually that low. So everybody's striving for that, really low PUE. They want to get there. And one of the things we ask in this survey is, well, what are you doing to get there? What are the technologies, the design strategies you're implementing? And you can see that hot and cold aisle containment is very popular. Increasing your server inlet air temps, also popular. Raising the server temps and then variable frequency drives on your components. And as things kind of become more expensive or more difficult, the adoption kind of goes down the curve. And this is also in line with previous years. You see that the easy stuff's up there. There's things you can do to improve your PUE, but as it gets kind of towards the end of the adoption curve, things get more expensive. And with all this focus on PUE and these efforts that people have made, what are we getting? This is a roll-up of data from 2011 to 2014. Self-reported PUEs. You can see that's nearly dead flat. And an improvement in PUE from 2011 to 2014. 3/4 of executives are saying that this is a major thing that they're going to track, that they're going to try to beat up their facilities teams to kind of do better with this, beat up their designers to get better PUE. We're not really getting anywhere. It's called diminishing returns. We're not getting a lot of return on this investment and kind of continue to beat this dead horse. So one of the other topics that's kind of a perennial issue for the Uptime Institute that we like to talk about is, how about comatose servers? How about the IT kit? How efficient is that? How well are you utilizing your IT? And huge percentage think it's no problem at all. Under 5%. The IT execs, 67% of them think that this is very, very low priority, not an issue in their shop. Huh. How do they possibly know? Half of them don't have any scheduled auditing to find out if they have comatose servers in place. And this isn't new. This has come from us before. We've said, you've got to be auditing your systems. You've got to be improving your IT utilization, not just focusing on improving your cooling systems. You need to really look at what is driving that consumption. And we asked folks who aren't auditing, who aren't working on this, well, what are the main barriers? What are your barriers to go out and finding these things, to auditing these servers? And the top answers were that the facilities team said the lack of management support. We're not getting the management support we need to go in and fix this problem. And when you ask the senior execs, they say, well, limited resources, that's why we're not getting the support. We're not going to fund it, we're not going to mandate it. So lack of management support plus too limited resources equals. Don't tell it to Barclays. Paul Nally from Barclays will be speaking tomorrow. They saved $10 million in 2 years doing a disciplined server decommissioning. There are resources to be gained back. There's money to be saved, significant money, in focusing on the IT. Which is we do our shameless plug for Server Roundup. This is the beautiful belt buckle that we'll be handing out tomorrow night to the winners of the Server Roundup, Sun Life and Barclays. And we will be talking about this throughout the year. If IT efficiency is something you want to get serious about, if server utilization is something you want to get serious about, we have starter kits that we're putting together right now that we'll have available to you. Grab me in the halls this week. I'd be happy to point you in the right direction on how to get started with this. Now I want to change gears a little bit to talk about one of the other major topics in this survey. And before I go down this route, I want to let you know that, first of all, to everyone who participated in the survey that's in this room, my sincerest thanks. I appreciate it. We try to keep the questions direct and small, so I know it takes a lot of time. This presentation is an excerpt of the data. So everyone who took this survey, you'll be getting the full data report, 30-some pages, the entirety of it, later this summer. So we'll have that for you. What we're going to be focusing on today, though, are just a couple of the key issues that are relevant to the rest of this week's conversations. So, trending IT deployment alternatives. How are enterprise users purchasing colocation and public cloud? What are the kind of trends that we see there? So, over previous years, we've asked a lot of folks if they're putting workloads in the cloud, if they're putting workloads in colocation. And the answer is almost 100% yes. We are deploying some workloads in off-premise third-party sites and services. So we asked this year the question slightly differently. So what percentage of your deployment mix is in-house, and what percentage is this out in the cloud in some sort of form factor or in colo? And I should say that this data here represents only enterprise, and enterprise and financials were actually pretty similar. So it's a roll-up of both enterprise and financial organizations that say that 2/3 of their stuff is still, their kit is still sitting in an owned data center. And you can see that's not going to change in the next 12 months. The growth is slow but steady growth to more off-premise options, a kind of a hybrid model. We've called it digital infrastructure, where you have some of your assets internal and a growing number of assets going external to the cloud, to colocation. The reason this isn't likely to change anytime soon is because there is a lot of investment that's currently tied up in owned data centers. This isn't going anywhere. So the idea that the data center is going away for the enterprise, it's not going to happen anytime soon. There's a lot of sunken investment currently in fairly new sites. So we kind of wanted to ask, though there is growth, though there are people deploying in colocation and multi-tenant sites more and more, how are you purchasing that, and what are the trends there? And some of the things that we found is the larger you are, the global companies, they have a lot of contracts. They have a lot of providers. You can see here the folks that we kind of separate out as large, 5,000 servers and above, 37% of those have 5 different colo providers or more. So you can see for a lot of these global firms, they want to have local sites that speak local language in country. So global companies, multiple data centers scattered throughout the globe. And we asked people some questions about selecting a colocation provider. How do you do it? What are the drivers? So what we found was the IT operations staff is the biggest influencer over a vendor decision. IT operations staff who probably doesn't know what's in the contracts, probably doesn't have any sense of what the requirements are on the floor of the site and how to build those requirements for a data center. They are the biggest influencer on that decision. What's driving that decision is the ability to scale. They want to be able to scale and have lower capital costs. Those are what's driving people to the colocation. And the primary selection criteria, what does your provider have to have, is availability. That's number one. Everything else is an also-ran. From energy efficiency to cost, all of it, availability is the number one concern for the colocation customer. So the people that are going out and buying these services, though, by and large, don't have a process in place to work through these issues. It's a fairly new challenge. So we were talking to some folks today who had run very large data centers internally, an enterprise end user, and he said when we went out and bid on colo jobs, it was on-the-job training. We didn't know how to do this. This was just something that was thrown at us, and I don't think they have formal processes for defining the requirements today. You can see the financial services organizations who probably have more experience in this field and have spent more time doing it. They're more mature on this kind of timeline, but there isn't a lot of built-in skill set on how to go about purchasing these kinds of services. Luckily, a lot of people are really happy with their services so far. You can see, nearly 90% satisfied with their colocation provider. That's pretty good numbers. Only 21% have had some kind of business interruption, some kind of outage. So the colo guys are doing pretty well. These companies are providing pretty good service for what people want to buy. You can compare that to business impacting outages for enterprise folks or folks in the financial market. You can see here that the colocation firms, and this is self-reporting, take this data with a grain of salt. According to the data that we received from the survey, the colocation folks are doing a better job than some of their counterparts in the enterprise. And we also asked folks who are purchasing these services, so how many hours of scheduled downtime are permitted annually in your contract? One of the data cuts we did on this was the IT ops folks. It was something like 50% had no idea. We didn't put that in there, I had to cut it out. So the people who were influencing this decision have no idea how much scheduled downtime or unscheduled downtime's in it. So that was kind of fascinating. But you'll see here, 75% of the financial market, their contracts specify 0 hours of unscheduled downtime. What's that mean if you're a colo provider? Better be concurrently maintainable. It's a pretty good pitch for Tier 3 certification. Don't mind if I do a little commercial here. But you can see that's why a lot of folks are going that route in the colocation and multi-tenant data center space. You need to be able to have scheduled maintenance. And one of the other questions that we kind of want to talk about today and have been talking about is, does your organization measure the cost of downtime? Is it lost hours on workstation hours? Is it lost transaction, lost customers? Do you have a number that you can put up there? Half, and I'd say that's probably a little bit overestimated. This is a very difficult stat to get at, but on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it? It's hugely important, but over the half of people can't get this. So this is a big challenge for our industry, defining that cost of an outage. and I think it's one of the kind of key points I want to leave you with is if that availability is key, we need to be able, as an industry and as a group here, to kind of define what that cost is for us. And that's an interesting data point that we asked for the first time this year. So I want to share just kind of the conclusions that we've drawn from this year's event. The colocation providers and the financial service organizations are on a similar maturation path. They are starting to look and behave a lot alike. We also find that a huge percentage of executives are trying to use an engineering tool as a management tool, and I don't think they're getting the results that they want to get. The majority of enterprise organizations are pretty happy with their colo providers, and that we've got our work cut out for us as an industry on kind of defining those requirements, defining those relationships going forward, and figuring out the cost of our downtime as we go into these relationships increasingly as enterprise operators, as buyers of third-party data center services. I wanted to take just a minute before I get into some questions about the survey data to just make an announcement and a plug for one other thing that we've been doing at the Uptime Institute. If you haven't seen it, we publish the Uptime Institute Journal twice a year. It includes survey data reports as well as a whole host of other content. The one I'm holding in my hand here is issue 3. It's written by Uptime Institute staff and our accredited tier designers. We are launching now a website and a mobile app. The website's available now. The app will be available. So if you want to read survey reports as well as data written by Uptime Institute staff, technical staff, as well as accredited tier designers, network members, we encourage you to go check this site out and keep us posted on what you think and submit articles as well. But for now, I'd like to just take some more questions on the survey data in the limited time we have left. So we have some mic runners. Please feel free to raise your hands, and I'll try to address the questions as best we can in the remaining minutes here. Yes, sir, right here.
So, I have a question on your PUE numbers. It seems really odd to me that it's actually going up. I would expect that still to be, excuse me, thank you. I would expect the PUE numbers still to be sliding down, you know, those seem awfully high.
Right, so the question was PUE numbers down, then slight tick up this last year from 1.67 to 1.7, and it should have still been kind of trending down. My argument for that is probably could be due to sample size. It could be due to difference in sample, but I'd also say in the big scheme of things for a lot of operators that 0.3 of a point on PUE doesn't translate to a lot for them. I don't think as a management standpoint on how much they're going to save. That could be within the kind of, I'd say the margin of error even. But the main point on that slide was just we're pretty flat. Even from 2011 to today, we're pretty flat on the big improvements we saw was, I want to say 2007, we started tracking it with our network members, and we asked network members, what's your average PUE? And in 2007, they said it was about 2.5. And that dropped really fast from 2007 to 2011. Now, it's pretty flat. But thanks for the question. Oh, another one right over here.
My question is, have you looked into what would make a customer choose one colocation data center from another? What are they looking for?
Sure. So we didn't necessarily ask the comparison question, what was the defining reason for that. I would say a few things I want to mention on that topic, though. The top driver was availability, followed by cost, and then security. And it kind of trickled down all the way to energy efficiency kind of at the bottom, right? Because the energy efficiency of your colo is your colo's problem. but that decision between one colocation provider and another is pretty complex, and that's one of the things that we've been working on at the Uptime Institute through our Forces initiative. The Forces is a system for making those kinds of decisions between building your own new site, renovating, deploying within a new site, or going to a colocation provider. What colocation provider should you choose? What are the kinds of influencers on that decision, factors you need to consider? If you happen to get a chance to pick up this journal, we have the first case study from the Forces system, where we have a large financial organization that goes through the decision-making process on how they decide which option to pick. And it's pretty surprising on what those influences are and how they came to the decision they came to from a broad set of stakeholders within their company to make the decision on a colo provider. It's a fascinating topic, so I encourage you. I'll hand you this on the way out. Yes? So the question was, how does a company differentiate when they're an enterprise organization between colocation and cloud when they're making these kinds of decisions? I think that differentiator is still currently important because a lot of it's applications based, right? It's based on the application that you want to deploy, and some just aren't in that fit at this point for a cloud distribution model. So folks who haven't put their applications in that type of a system framework to be able to deploy it as a cloud service still are definitely going to need the colocation choice. Sir.
Dr. Bob, Matt.
Good to see you.
Just a comment on your PUE numbers.
Yes.
They're not unreasonable, because without an economizer cooling system, it is going to be very difficult to get below 1.7. You might get down to 1.5 if you have the right environment and all the rest of it. And in order to get below that, you have to install an economizer cooling system. You got to build a new data center.
You hit the nail on the head. And I'd encourage folks, I keep pointing you back to the journal. Chris Crosby's got a great piece in the journal that goes into the analysis. What's the cost analysis to reach that PUE? How much does it cost for you to get there? And is it worth it? So that's a great question and a thing to talk about. Mr. Johnston.
Thank you. When you surveyed users on the cost of downtime, did you ask them how they calculated it? Some people, for example, only include direct business costs. Other people go to great extremes for lost corporate image and things of this nature. So how is it calculated?
Yeah, so I would say that we did not ask how they calculated it this year, just whether or not they do. Within the Forces system that we've been working on, there is some prescriptive advice on how to start calculating that within your own firm. I'd love to work next year on some questions that get at that, though. How can you, because it's going to be different for every business. So the question's kind of qualitative, right? Not quantitative. It's not an easy one to collect in a survey response, but maybe as a multiple choice. What are the factors that go into your decision? If you do calculate the cost of downtime, what factors do you include? I have a notepad up here. I need to write that down for next year's survey. But I think that's a very good question. We just didn't get at it this year, and I think we could have, now that you mention it. Another mic coming your way, sir.
I might jump with the entire group. Did you ask the question when you looked at PUE as, does your corporate culture have a driver towards reduction in carbon footprint? And is that driving the reason executives are looking at PUE?
Right. So over the last 3 years, we've asked that question. As an organization, are you under carbon reduction? Are you tracking carbon? Are you tracking your water? And the number statistically has been, the larger the organization, the more likely they are tracking that. It's been in the, between 25 and 30% are doing something with that year over year. But what we found with PUE and PUE reduction that metric, we use it because we have it, not because it's going to get to how much carbon overall you're using or how efficient your overall IT footprint is. So there are percentage of companies tracking that carbon impact, but as far as getting to that level where you can track the overall utilization of your entire management process, it's still eluding us. I've got about 15 seconds left. I think I need to hold off questions until we're out in the expo hall and I've got a beer in my hand and we can talk about any numbers of things on the survey data. But I want to point out a couple of the next sessions that are coming up that I think are going to be pretty exciting. So in this room, within the next 5 minutes here, we'll be hosting David Fulgar from Netflix, talking about Netflix's content delivery system. And in the room adjacent here, just to the right, walk out this door and to the right, we're going to have Telefonica, one of the winners of the Uptime Institute Brill Awards. And the content for that is Powering Brilliant IT. It's about the global strategy of Telefonica's data center program. I would encourage you to attend either of those sessions. You'll find them very valuable. And again, I want to thank all of you for attending Symposium this week. I know it's going to be a great week, and I can't wait to spend more time talking to you, working with you on your questions. So thank you very much.